Welcome to the Increda-dental podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Flynn. Our goal is to make a positive impact in the dental field. I have been a dental assistant, a biller, an office manager, a scheduler, a hygienist, and a dental coach, which makes me your biggest fan. My husband was in the military and we traveled all over the United States. I had opportunities to work in many different practices, and I saw incredible practices and practices that had a lot of potential within them. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive into the podcast. Welcome to the Increda-dental podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Flynn. Today, we're going into the research of a practice that we worked with, Dr. Sean. He contacted us because he was struggling with his practice, feeling overwhelmed and overworked and not knowing where to turn. So let's dive into his story. But first, a little bit of the history of Dr. Sean. Dr. Sean was located in the Pacific Northwest. He purchased this practice from a previous dentist. The previous dentist had been there for 23 years, and he had owned that practice now for 11 years. This was primarily a PPO practice. And we looked at how many dentists were in the community. Now, this was a smaller town, less than 100,000 people, and the ratio was really low as far as patients per dentist. They were around 700 patients per dentist, which is not what you want to have here or here. And so we started looking at the surrounding farming community. And when we included that, it was more around 2,700 patients per dentist, but very competitive in that area. Now, he was located in a medical strip mall, and it was more like a medical strip mall parking lot. In there were several other dentists, there were specialists, there were physicians. There were a lot of competition right within that area. Now, at first, when Dr. Sean purchased this practice, they were making $101,000 roughly on average every month. And now they were making around $82,000 per month. And that's why he contacted us. He said, the problem I'm having is I'm needing to put payroll on my credit card. I haven't been on vacation for 2.5 years, and I'm waking up in panic attacks. And Dr. Sean was debating about possibly selling to a DSO. He said, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I do know I need help. And I'm asking you to help me move my practice forward. So with that information, we started to look at what we could do to help Dr. Sean. So we started looking at some of his numbers, but also looking at opportunity as far as where are we missing and what is changing in his practice. We weren't sure what was the initial problem for this to happen, for that change in the amount of money coming in every month. And we wondered if the practice was just older and needed to be remodeled. But the dentist who he purchased the practice from had remodeled it 2 years beforehand, and it looked really nice. It was a very nice looking practice. So then we started to look at what else would be happening in this practice. And we learned a couple of things. First off, they didn't have any marketing, external or internal marketing, that they didn't have a recare system, a way to connect and collect the patients who have been in your practice, bringing them back to your practice, as well as patients who had uncompleted treatment plans. And then they weren't setting up financial arrangements with patients when they didn't want to do treatment or weren't ready to do their treatment. They weren't offering opportunities through a third party or a same day, 90 days, 60 days, same as cash. They weren't helping patients complete their treatment. And so what we learned was this, as we got a little bit deeper into his practice, was that the practice, when he purchased it, the staff stayed on for the first 8 years. But slowly, around 7.5 years, actually, the staff started to retire. 2 of them retired, 2 moved, and 2 of them were just done with dentistry, and they quit the business. And this staff, they had amazing systems and techniques and ways of connecting with the patients that Dr. Sean hadn't realized, and he hadn't tapped into it. And now he was trying to run a practice, but didn't know the systems or techniques to help his practice to move forward, to be profitable, but also beneficial to the patients, because the patients were actually losing out. They weren't getting the care they needed on a regular basis for their preventative treatment, but also for treatment to keep them healthy. So the practice was struggling and the patients were struggling too. And this was something that we could definitely help with. Now, the first thing Dr. Sean said was, well, let's get in the ReCare system. Let's get a protocol going. Let's look at how we can do financing for patients through a third party. But when we started looking more into the numbers, we explained to Dr. Sean that he was bleeding out. His practice numbers were too high, and we needed to look at the low-lying fruit and collect those and fix those first. So that way, when we ramped up production, when we worked on getting production up, he wasn't bleeding out. His business was profitable at a higher level than ever before. So what did we see? We saw that his staff salaries the total payroll was way too high. You want to see your payroll around 30%. His was around 43%. His lab fees were high as well as supplies. His marketing, well, he wasn't marketing at all, so that was easy, but also he was struggling with new patients. And then he was paying too much on insurance and the legal fees, as well as the facility and the equipment. So with all those things together, his practice was under a lot of pressure. So we started to talk to him about, let's start with a low-lying fruit. So we looked at his lab fees. He was paying roughly $10,000 a month, which was 12% of his income. And we told him, your ideal is really to be around 9%. Now, if you're an office that does a lot of crowns and bridges and implants and dentures, you're going to pay a little bit more. But around 9% is the goal. So we talked to other dentists in the area. We also found out the quality of work Dr. Sean liked to do. And then we compared it to other labs. And we found labs that met his standard of care, but also cost him less. And we were able to see his bill drop from that almost $10,000 bill down to a little bit below $7,900. And so that was a savings of over $2,000 that he benefited from, but he didn't compromise anything when he did this. We just did some research and found labs that would help serve him and his patients better. Then we started looking at supplies. Now, supplies, you want to have 5, maybe 6% tops, and he was paying 9%. And so we started talking to the assistant who did all the ordering, and we looked at what systems that they had, and that was the problem. They didn't have a system, and she would just order things when she thought they were on sale. And as what we learned also was that a lot of their materials were expiring. They didn't have a proper way to rotate items, and it was costing them more through supplies because it was a chaotic way of ordering supplies. So we first then, with that assistant, talked about a budget, that we wanted to have a budget around $5,000, and that's what she should aim for to pay for supplies, or aim to be below that. And then we started researching how quickly they go through their products and supplies. And then from there, when is the good buy price? Sometimes we'll think, oh, buy 5 gets 3 free, but they bump the price up of the buy the 5. So it's not really a sell. So we talked about ways to identify when it's truly a sell and applying that. And what we saw was supplies going from $7,300 to $4,920. So that was a savings of $2,400. So simply by getting the lab fees down and the supplies down, his overhead dropped by almost $5,000. And what a relief that was to Dr. Sean. It helped him to have a little bit less panic and knowing that things were starting to move in the right direction. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. So we kept working with Dr. Sean, and he's going on his second vacation this year. And I am so excited to see him make the progress that he wanted to have and his stress level reduce down. Now, the next step for Dr. Sean will be implementing systems for his ReCare, for financing, for all those little things that help get patients back into the practice. We'll be working with this with Dr. Sean, but we're also going to cover that in the next podcast of how to have the right systems in place. Now, if you found this podcast helpful, please share it with your friends. Our goal is your success. Thanks for joining us.